Hello and welcome to Now What, our first live stream. We are so glad you are joining us today. I am Ms. Jen, your trauma-informed educator, author, keynote speaker, trainer, and consultant. And we have with us today Jessica Lammers and Kelsey Schmitz from our team, plus Julie Beam from the Attachment and Trauma Network. We are so very, very glad you're joining us, whether you're catching us live or on the replay. You've asked, we're answering. As a trauma-informed trainer, I've worked with tons of educators across North America, and often we hear folks say things like, we wish we could have ongoing contact and connection with you to keep our practices sharp and to learn new things so that we can implement them in our classrooms and schools. That's really what these lives are all about. Tonight's is called So Stress Affects Behavior, Now What? Each time we meet, we'll give you practical ideas for your trauma-sensitive classroom and school. That's a bit about me. Jessica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Jessica Lammers, and I am a former teacher and instructional coach, and now part of Miss Jen's team. And I help create content and prepare for trainings, and I'm a thought partner. I travel with Miss Jen, and oftentimes am her right hand, but mostly behind the scenes.
So glad you're here. Jessica is a master teacher, and anybody who has the privilege of working with her becomes a better and better educator because of their connection with her too. So I'm so lucky that she's part of our crew. Kelsey, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Schmitz. I'm a part of Miss Jen's team. I do a lot of the work behind the scenes, working on content, planning travel, and a little bit of marketing. I've been a 5th and a 3rd grade teacher and also did a year in preschool, and have been with Miss Jen for about 5 years now.
Kelsey, you've been here since the beginning, and it means the world to me. Kelsey is someone who lives these practices both personally and professionally. And it's a gift that you're part of our team, helping us help other educators too. Both Jessica and Kelsey are educators with years of experience in the classroom. And what not everyone, even folks who are familiar with ATN, may or may not know is that Julie is an educator too. So Julie, take it away. Tell us about you.
Yes. Well, I am with the Attachment and Trauma Network, and I have I've been there for 16 years. This is my 16th year as the executive director. Prior to that, I guess you could call me an educator. I have a degree in education. I didn't teach a lot. I taught my daughter in virtual school and did some teaching early in my 20s, but I came to this work, this trauma-informed work, because I had a daughter with significant trauma background. And I've known Miss Jen and appreciated her talent and felt the passion and the importance of trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive education for at least a decade together, right? I mean, we've been doing that since, 2014, 2013, somewhere in that neighborhood. And a decade sounds like a long time when it feels like we're just getting started, doesn't it?
It really does feel like a long time, but things have changed in that amount of time too.
They have. We do the largest trauma-informed schools conference every February, and Ms. Jen is always a part of that. And I'm just so happy to watch the movement continue to grow and grow and grow.
Me too. And that's what it's all about, because there are so many people with so much to offer. And when we work together, the impact for youth, their families, and educators too is just bigger and bigger as well. So thanks to all of you for being here tonight. I'm just delighted to get this started. And a bit of a focus on what this time is about and what educators are invited to do, whether you are here on the live or catching us on replay. We invite you to show up safely and bravely with or without snacks. That's totally your call. You're welcome here 100% who you are and as you are as well. So I have snack tonight is tea from the local tea cellar. I'm drinking ginger peach this evening, which is my fave. Anybody else want to share a snack?
Got raspberry kiss.
I think mine was blueberry buzz, also from the tea cellar.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Good stuff.
It's totally teed out here because I've got some sweet Georgia tea too. So here we go.
You know, Julie's from the South when she's drinking her sweet tea. I love it so much. That's awesome. You're welcome here with your snacks too. And at any time you are free to introduce yourself in the chat and engage in the chat as little or as much as you'd like to. One of the things we'll start with is a check-in. And one of my favorite check-ins that our crew have been using lately is to ask people what kind of egg goes with how you're doing. So there are tons of eggs. There are scrambled eggs, fried eggs, over easy eggs, deviled eggs even. So if you were to think about how you're doing today, what kind of egg goes with that? And you're welcome to add that to the chat or to the comments at any point when you're ready to do that. So my egg today would be egg on your face. This is our first live. We already had a little bit of technical difficulty on my end in the beginning. And so I'm a little worried about egg on the face today and being embarrassed. I also know it's safe here to make mistakes and we'll get through it together. Kelsey, how about you?
I think I'm an omelet tonight. We have a birthday in our family, so we've been party planning. So there's just been lots of things going into it. So not just a plain egg, we've just lots of different pieces.
And with permission, I'm going to say happy birthday, Olivia. Jess, how about you?
I am feeling a raw egg tonight. I feel like I've got the shell and it's just starting to crack. And like I said, I'm usually behind the scenes or not so up front and center. And so feeling a little vulnerable, a little maybe breaking out of the shell.
We love being part of helping you come out of your shell. That's awesome. Julie, do you want to share?
Oh, sure. Maybe over easy. I don't know. I'm feeling, I'm not as nervous, obviously, as Jess because I don't spend a lot of time behind the scenes, but this is a new thing, right? And we're in it and we're kind of winging it. So, we might be a little runny or a little all over the place, and it's okay because we just stop that up and go on, right?
I love it. We're going to be real because that's who we are. We're real people doing real work. And we know how important it is to be real with kids as well. They see through anything that isn't that way. Number 3, where you're invited to nurture and challenge one another in this space so that we're all growing. And finally, we hope you will join us in being relentless for school change together. Change that is good for all of us. And that means personally, we may be advocating, but it also requires that we think about how we can work together and be more powerful in unifying. So that's where we are.
Well, being an educator, while rewarding, is not always easy. And so being former educators, we definitely know that you wear many hats, and we would like to take a moment and recognize you and take our hats off to you, educators.
And we're going to have a little bit of fun, if I can get it going at the same time.
Usually we do a mindful moment, but we thought we'd be a little silly.
Yes.
That's right.
Friday.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I got my hat. Julie, I forgot to tell you we were going to have hats. So
I know. I don't have.
That's on me. All right. Hats off to you, educators.
Right.
Here we go.
All right. That's fun. Our topic tonight.
Yes. Sorry. The big question
what is it?
The day. The big question of the day is stress affects behavior. So now what?
What do we do about it?
What do we do?
Big behaviors at school. Everybody's got them. We work with educators all across North America, and we know that behavior is a concern for educators, for families. It's a concern by students too. And there's so much we can do about it by putting trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive practices in place intentionally as individuals, but also as a collective in our communities. So tonight, we're having our first live. We're going to focus on how you can use the hand model of the brain in your classroom and school with youth of all different ages to help you address what's driving some of the big behavior or even disengaged behavior that you may be noticing in your educational spaces. So just a little bit curious, I'm pretty sure everybody on camera right now is familiar with Dan Siegel and the hand model of the brain, right? I'm curious if we have people in the chat yet, if they want to share, is this something they've heard of before, or is it new for folks? And whether it's new for you or it's something that you're an old hat with because you're experienced with it, either way, we have some ideas for you tonight. So if you notice anything in the chat at any point, Kelsey, and want to share it, feel free to do so. I wrote about Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain in my book, Building Trauma-Sensitive Schools. If you don't know who Dan Siegel is, he's a neuropsychiatrist from UCLA who's brilliant and also really good at explaining complex neurobiological concepts to people who aren't scientists, which I really appreciate. And his hand model of the brain is something that I have used for years with adults and with youth, again, of all different ages. And to really understand it, there are a few things you do need to know about the brain. The brain develops a lot like a house, from the bottom up and the inside out. It's those lower downstairs brain structures that are more developed and online at birth. And those upper structures are dependent on environmental influences and development to really come into their full capacity. In fact, the brain changes throughout our entire lifespans. It's plastic until we die. And the upstairs brain in particular isn't fully developed in folks until approximately the mid-20s. So one of the cool things about Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain is it can give us a common language in our schools to understand how stress affects the nervous system, the brain, and then behavior. But it also gives us a language to really connect with one another and support one another through it in ways that are responsive to behavioral needs, but also that can prevent them too. So we're going to teach you the hand model of the brain tonight, and what you need is your hand to be able to do this. So as we kind of talk about these concepts, we'll compare it to your hand, and you can do this right along with us. And the very deep downstairs part of your brain at the back of your head is the brain stem. This is in your deep downstairs brain. Some folks even call it the basement brain. And we're going to think of it as being where your palm connects to your wrist or where your brain stem connects to your spinal cord. This deep downstairs part of your brain is really influencing a lot of functions that keep you alive. So breathing rate, oxygen rate, blood pressure, digestion, all of those things are influenced by activity in the downstairs brain that you don't have to control or make a choice about. It's just doing its job. And then when we go up a bit, still in the downstairs part of the brain, we can bring our thumb in like this. And this area of the brain has several structures, often thought of as the limbic system or the limbic area, that have a lot to do with our emotional experiences. And so we're going to talk about a couple structures there, one being the hippocampus. So I'm going to have people, wherever you are, just say that with me, hippocampus. And I'm going to teach this to you just like I would teach it to kids. So if I had a group of first graders, second graders, even kindergartners, or all the way up through graduate students and practicing educators, I would say, I want you to remember you have a hippocampus, not a hippopotamus in your brain. And I say to kids, I want you to remember that because the hippocampus has a lot to do with certain kinds of memories. So if folks can remember a birthday that they've had in the past, or a book they were reading, or something they learned earlier in the year, the hippocampus is like the search engine that helps bring that up. So it's really important for us knowing our own story and who we are, our sense of self, but it matters when it comes to learning too. Still in that downstairs part of the brain, in that limbic area, there's another structure called the amygdala. Go ahead and say that with me. The amygdala. Yeah, these are almond-shaped structures, and this is like the security guard in our brain. Some people call it dog. Always looking out for danger or signs of safety so that the nervous system in the body can react accordingly depending on whether safety or threat is present. And so what happens is sensory information is coming up through the spinal cord, up through the brainstem, passes through that amygdala area, and it's working with other brain structures, including things in the upstairs brain too, to determine, are we safe or is there a threat? And if there's a threat detected, that information is then sent to the downstairs part of the brain, which is why our heart rate may go up or blood pressure may change, or we may have a slowing of digestion and more resources sent to our big muscles so we can run, hide, or fight because of the threat, which is really a smart thing and a wise thing to do if we're in a jungle being chased by a tiger. The problem is that the amygdala and the systems that it operates within aren't always accurate in how they detect whether something is a threat or if it's safe or not. So sometimes there's not actually a threat, but it's perceived as such, and lots of things can influence that. And we get this whole body then stress response that goes with that because of how that threat was detected, perceived, if you will.
Jen, so what was your amygdala doing when our technology crashed 5:28 before we went live? Because my heart started beating and I wasn't quite sure what was kicking in there.
Absolutely. I know my cheeks were getting red. I could feel the heat, which is often one of my first body clues that I'm becoming stressed. I also feel my energy coming forward, like I've got to deal with this, and some thoughts start racing. How about the rest of you? What are your responses inside like when your amygdala is detecting a threat of some kind?
I usually go quiet.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing, Jess.
Yeah.
I think I feel that heat too. Maybe it's the fair skinness of me that is the reason. But yeah, the feet. But for in your situation just now, I just took a deep breath because I was like, well, I've used this technology before. I know it can be tricky and it always works out, right? Mm-hmm. So I was able to go there.
Yeah. I'm a go mode. So like we sat here for a few seconds and then I'm like, I need to go help Jen and make sure she's okay. So I might be more of a fight than a flight.
You're also a connector. And I think that's a real sign of how you go towards people who are in stress, to be of support to them, which is really what this work is all about. Thanks for sharing. So the good news of it all is we don't always have to only rely on that security guard, that amygdala, to help us when we're stressed, though it's meant to kick in. It's meant to do that when we're truly in danger. And it's a good thing that we have that. Okay. Another part of the brain we want to talk about is the upstairs brain. So if you take your thumb in like this, like we had it before, and then you curl those fingers on top of it, the upstairs brain is the part of it we're going to talk about is the prefrontal cortex. And it's where those kind of final fingers cover over your thumb. And that prefrontal cortex, that upstairs part of your brain on your body, is behind your forehead, behind your eyes. This is the part of your upstairs brain that helps you think, plan, and learn. So if you're teaching a lesson about a math concept and you want students to be listening, focused, taking it in, working with the information, practicing, they need to be using their upstairs brain, that prefrontal cortex. But the same is true if youth are in some kind of a process or an issue, a concern that's come up, and they have a decision that they have to make or a problem that they have to think through how to solve. That upstairs brain is key for being able to do that. It helps us be thoughtful, to think things through, to make a decision, not to necessarily act fast right away. So what happens when information comes up through the brain and is detected as a threat, then that amygdala starts doing its job, sending that information down, and we get this whole body stress response. And if for some reason we can't solve the problem, or we don't have the capacity for whatever reason to either release that stress or to settle it, what can happen is if it gets too big and we get too dysregulated, we may end up flipping our lid. So our brain doesn't actually flip. But what happens is the information isn't going to the upstairs brain, which means folks are losing access to some of that capacity, or even more than some of that capacity for the upstairs brain. So when folks are overwhelmed in the stress state, they're not thinking things through. They're not making a choice about their behavior. Their body is having a whole body stress response that can be somewhat dysregulated or all the way to a flooded, overwhelmed state where what we're asking them to do may be a can't, not a won't, because they're in a whole body stress response. So question of the day is, have you seen somebody flip their lid before? Of course you have. And every educator in the world has experienced that. And the truth is we've all flipped our lids at times too.
My favorite part is when you're teaching it and the kids tell me about how their parents flip their lids, or their brother or sister flip their lids, or anyone else but them.
Yes, absolutely. It happens for sure.
Gotta be
Definitely.
Yes. Well, besides emotions, there are other ways that your body can become overwhelmed or start to become dysregulated or even flip your lid. Jen, can you share some of the other ways that can happen?
Absolutely. So oftentimes when we think about stress, we think of emotional stress, and that can definitely lead to dysregulation or flipping of the lid kind of at that extreme end. And flipping of the lid can look like big behavior. It can also look like a shutdown. So just when you talked about that withdrawal that you might feel or going quiet, that can be a stress response too. But that stress isn't only emotional. Sometimes it's caused by overwhelm related to being tired or not having enough sleep or just not feeling well. It can be linked to too much sensory information or even not enough sensory information, to auditory processing kind of challenges or overwhelm that can occur, visual kinds of information that's too much or not enough, but other processing demands or difficulties can come into play too. So it's not just about what's happening outside of us, it can also be what's happening inside of us. Could be linked to adversity, stress, trauma that people are experiencing either in the past or currently, but it can also go with how we're each different, and there's incredible ranges of neurodiversity that affect how folks take in information and how they respond to it too. So there can be lots of factors that influence regulation and dysregulation, including flipping of the lid.
Yeah, because as you're talking, there are times where I start to feel overwhelmed and I go very quiet and it's more of a shutdown. And then depending on the situation, there are other times then where it might be more of a flight or a fight back.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Beyond teaching, about the brain, we can also teach different signals for the different states of the brain. Would you mind showing the next slide so that everybody can see? See, I didn't talk about my second job as a hand model. And take us through maybe the emotions that go with the different states of the brain.
Sure. So kind of to break this down, what we're encouraging you to do is to learn the hand model of the brain. Watch this on replay as many times as you need to so you can start teaching it. You're welcome to modify the language a little bit to fit your learners, because what we're going to teach with a group of first and second graders would be very different from 16 and 17-year-olds, although there's quite a bit of crossover too. And then once folks understand these processes and we're using this language together as part of our rhythm and in our community, we can also start using signals to one another to show what brain state we're in, and that can help us be of support too. So this first picture from Jessica's lovely hand modeling that she did for us here would be what goes with a regulated brain. Okay. And none of us are regulated all the time. Our energy is supposed to go up and down. We're supposed to be, it's healthiest when we can be flexible in our nervous systems and how we change between brain states. But in a regulated state, we still are feeling things. We're not calm necessarily all the time, but we're in control and we're ready to think, plan, learn, and focus, which is important at school, but it's also really good for our health to spend as much time here as we possibly can, because the other brain states take a whole lot of energy. So the next signal would be kind of taking your fingers and moving them a bit, indicating I'm dysregulated. I'm not necessarily flipping my lid yet, but I'm either really stirred up or I'm starting to shut down, and it's affecting my upstairs brain kind of functions at the moment. even in a temporary way. And then this would be my lid is flipped. So I'm overwhelmed, I'm flooded, I've lost control. And when we can know this about one another, it can then influence how we interact and what we do in response.
What I love about this is in a classroom setting, it gives us a common language. And even without words, a common language. But it takes the shame out of it. That they're able to share a state of regulation and that everybody's in different states at different points of time.
Yeah.
And not only that, but also other kids are able to see that everyone, if you specifically, if you're a transition or something and you're able to ask, how's everybody doing right now? And they're able to show you kind of where they're at, then they can witness where everybody else is. And it helps normalize the states that we're all there sometimes. So not just take the shame out of it, but if we can also practice building awareness of where we're at, we can start to do something about it and start to notice it ahead of time, to help us stay regulated and ready to learn for longer periods of time.
I love how you talked about that, Jessica, because often when we think of big behaviors, or at least educators we work with, will say things to us like, well, what do we do after it happens? Or, what consequences do we give so that this doesn't happen again? And our power is actually at the other end. It's at the front loading. It's what we do before the behavior gets big. And the more we can bring awareness to ourselves and to those around us, and for kids to be able to start doing that, the more we can do things to help one another to prevent those behaviors. So is teaching about the hand model going to prevent all big behavior or disengaged behavior? Definitely not. If we use the hand signals, is that going to ensure that we never have flooded arousal states or energy states? I don't usually say arousal states with kids, but that's kind of the scientific word for it. With kids, I like to say brain states or energy states, but no, it's not going to ensure that we never have those again. But the important thing is, what can we start to learn about ourselves about what leads up to that? What happens during it? What can we do to start to either prevent or respond early so we prevent it from leading to a flipped lid?
And to be able to share with the others so that they can help you in those times. So if I'm able to communicate to someone and tell them, Kelsey had a great example of this the other day. But if I'm able to communicate to someone, hey, this is what helps me, or this is what causes me to become dysregulated, then they can jump in and help with some of that too and know what to do. You should share your story.
So I was making dinner the other night and I was hungry and a little tired, and I have 4 kids, and there was a lot of joyful noise happening in the background. My teenage son was drumming on the countertop and my 9-year-old daughter was playing the piano, and I just found myself feeling dysregulated. Not for anyone's fault, but I could feel myself, the sensory input was too much. And so I just voiced that. I said, guys, I feel like my lid is going to flip. And this is something we use in our house. And so they knew what I meant when I said, it's too much noise for me right now. Can everybody take it elsewhere? And my son said, oh, okay, mom, my bad. And walked away. And it was an opportunity that it didn't take a lot of time, but I could feel it rising in myself. And instead of snapping at him, I was able to state where I was. He respected that. We ended on connection, and everybody was good. And it could have ended totally differently had we not had that language that we practice in our house.
Yeah. I think when we don't approach it in that way, what can happen is, we're close to flipping our lid. We bark, we react fast. And then the other person may not even understand why. But now, like you said, there's this disconnection, there's shame, there's blame, and there may or may not be repair afterwards. But if we can slow that process down a little bit and communicate our needs, then we learn about self, the other people learn about us, and we can be there for one another. Julie, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I'm just thinking that, a lot of times when the kids in our care get to that dysregulated state and they're not, and they don't recognize it, or they're not able to articulate it well, then they go on to that lid flipping state. And by that time, we're in a dysregulated state. So it's contagious in that way. So the real teaching, the real ability to make a difference is in that regulated state, just like you said. That's such an important lesson for all of us, is that what our goal should be is to teach the understanding of what is going on inside, of how I am feeling, how I am regulated, and that be able to recognize that. That's huge. And when we all are able to do that, because a lot of us adults are still struggling to do that at times, it gets easier. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we can probably all think of a time where we were starting to dysregulate ourselves, and how important it can be to just name that, to say, whoa, I think I'm close. I'm dysregulated. At least maybe I'm not fully flipping my lid, but I could be. I think you're there too. Let's take a pause, or let's rewind here. What can we do together to slow this down, to help get ourselves better regulated before we finish whatever it is we're working on or talking about or thinking through. This models to kids that it happens to all of us. Yes. And importantly, the more stress and actual threat that people are under, the harder that's going to be, right? Because we're not supposed to be regulated when we're going through trauma. It's supposed to be regulated when we're going through trauma. So just thinking about all of the folks who are dealing with extreme conditions related to weather right now, or fires, or all of the ors, right? All the other things, the layers of harm, and the stress, for instance, of being an educator right now. Like, the more we're carrying, the harder it is to get regulated. And that's true for youth too, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, we have some things we want to give you. All right. So, new on the blog today is a blog post basically dedicated to the hand model of the brain. It will give you a free poster of the hand signals. You can print that out if you want to, use it in your classroom or school, teach others, share it. It's there for you. And along with that, we have a handout that lists 3 different ways to use it. So I'm going to talk to you about one of them, and there's 2 more ways there. So Jess kind of started to mention this, like after a transition, whether it's after lunch or after recess, whatever it might be. One thing you could do as a classroom teacher is to say to your whole group, we've learned the brain states, and we know about the hand model of the brain. Let's each check in with ourselves right now. And if you want to, you can even show us where you are at. So are you regulated? Is your nervous system experiencing some dysregulation, or are you close to, or have you flipped your lid? And then you can kind of change what you do in response to folks or with the group based on that. So if you're seeing that a lot of people are dysregulated, you can acknowledge that and say, you know what, I'm kind of sensing that and feeling it in the room too. Let's do a brain break right now that might help us release some of that energy or settle some of that energy. And if it's more just 1 or 2 kids, then you might privately connect with them if you have an opportunity to do so, to ask them, what might help you right now? What can I do to help you? So that we're not pushing them into something that they're not ready for. We're tending to their needs while we're staying connected to ambitious learning at the very same time.
So if I want to, can you tell everybody how they get to the blog, how they get to email, because they're going to want to print this off and have Jessica sign autographs.
I definitely should have had Jessica sign the poster. What was I thinking?
Yes. Okay. So, because you didn't mention how they get there, how they get to all.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So on this slide, you can see that there's a QR code that takes you to my website, msjenalexander.com. In the kind of the space at the top, you can click on blog, and then it would be the most recent blog post to January 10th, 2025. You click on that, and in that blog post, there are links that take you right to the downloads, and you can print right from there. You can also find information that we give out regularly on social media. So all of our apps are listed there. We'll post some information related to these concepts in the next couple of weeks on social media too. So feel free to comment, share ideas there. What we're not going to do in the live or on social media is talk about individual kids or groups of kids. That's not the purpose of this. And we want to maintain confidentiality at all times, of course. But we can talk in general ways about things you might be trying or what's working, or you can even ask questions. And we'll be as responsive as we can be.
All right. So what is next?
One more thing that I want to mention
Brain
that's
books.
connected to the blog. Brain books. So when I spent over 20 years in the classroom as a special education teacher, professional school counselor, registered school-based play therapist, and I have taught the hand model of the brain over and over again to kids of all different ages. And when working with elementary students, one of my favorite things to do is to tie that with, and actually with kids of all ages, tie it to lessons in the curriculum Mind Up, which I don't get anything from telling you about. It's just an inexpensive, but also grounded in neuroscience, good stuff, Mind Up, that can really improve your lessons on regulation for all kids as part of your tier 1 instruction core. The brain books are not part of the Mind Up curriculum, but it's something that I created as a project and did with all of our learners with incredible results. And so there's kind of different ways you can do this. I often did it in 2nd grade. And so as we learned about the different parts of the brain, the nervous system, stress responses, kids were creating a nonfiction book about their brains as we went. And so it was a way for them to really put their learning in their own words in this nonfiction book, but then they could also tie it to their own experiences, their own needs, and start exploring what helps them when they're dysregulated. Some students love to have a blank book and they just ran with it and got really creative. Other students benefited from a more structured approach. So what is on the blog right now is a template that will allow you to use that structured approach with your students. And then if you want to make blank ones that kids can just create their own brain books and take it in the direction they want to, you can do that too. But the template is there. You can download it. All you have to do is make copies and assemble it. And also on the blog are directions for how I used it to coach kids through writing their brain books, which was a powerful learning experience, and kids loved it. They were so proud of it. And the other bonus is that then they take it home at the end and they share it with somebody. And now we're taking this core instruction beyond the classroom and into our communities, because this information is for all of us.
Yeah.
Now what? We've taught you a lot tonight. We've given you some ideas. Kelsey was the one, as we were putting this together, who said, now we need a list of like, now what for the educators? If they're going to do 3 things when they leave here, what would we recommend? And so number 1 is rewatch this live. Hear the language, learn how to teach the hand model of the brain, tweak the words so that it fits your group. Number 2, then start teaching it. Just jump in. Be honest with your kids about, you know what, I'm learning this too. It may feel a little awkward at first. The more you practice, the easier it will get. Then 3, once you have that common language, you're able to talk about brain states, model the hand signals, and start using those in the classroom. You can invite students to use the hand signals too. Never force kids to share that, especially in a large group, but not individual either. But it can be an invitation that they can take or leave. And with that in mind, I think it's time for our Q&A. So the exciting news is that I am going to add 2 people to our stage here. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi.
Hi, and your dad, Jay. We're so glad you've joined us. You've been here the whole time. And I know you are not new to the hand model of brain, but you heard me kind of explain it tonight. And I wondered if you might have a question for us that you'd like to ask.
I do.
Okay.
What part of the brain makes you choose the decisions you make?
Oh, that's such a good question. Are you thinking like when you make a good decision about something, what part of your brain helps you with that?
Yeah.
Oh, great question. Our whole brain helps us with all kinds of things. Your upstairs brain, that prefrontal cortex, has a lot to do with the thoughtful decisions that you make. So like, let's say you're having a conflict with a friend and you sit back and you think about, they have some big feelings. I have some big feelings. How do I want to try to resolve this with them, and you're thinking it through, you're using that prefrontal cortex, that upstairs brain. And sometimes it's called the PFC. What do you think? Do you use your prefrontal cortex?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you do too. You're a good thinker, a wise thinker. I know you're using it. And the great news is the more you use it, the stronger it gets. How old are you, Sophie?
9.
You're 9. Oh, what a fun age to talk to you about these kinds of things. Do you have anything else that you want to share?
I don't.
No.
No.
How about if I ask you a question? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Do you think it is ever okay for people to flip their lids?
Well, if somebody flips their lid when they're in danger, because that means their amygdala is going off, they really need to flip their lids, and it would, if you didn't, it would just be hard, because you would, like, if you were lit on fire and you were on fire, and you weren't using your, and you didn't flip your lid, you wouldn't do anything, and you would just stand there on fire.
That's right. Like there's times when people are in danger and they need to act fast, right? To help themselves, to protect themselves, to stay safe or get safe. Absolutely. And it isn't even when we're just physically in danger, but if somebody's being threatened or harmed by the words that somebody uses, or they're being treated unfairly, then it makes sense, and it's okay to flip our lids to protect ourselves in those situations too, because people aren't always treated well, and that's not okay. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. I had a great time.
Good. How about you, Julie? Do you have any questions?
Well, I think Sophie has got a career in neuroscience for sure. What questions do I have? Well, when we flip our lids, because we all do, I mean, and I'm hoping everybody out there can imagine and remember a time that happened to you. What helps us at that point? I mean, we lose access to being able to use our prefrontal cortex and think and make sense. So what next?
Mm-hmm. So you're asking, when people are close to flipping their lids, whether they're adults or they're kids, what kind of things like that might they try? Yeah. And I think the kind of simplest answer to that is it's different for different people, right? Like for some folks, moving their bodies, big muscle movement is a helpful way to release some of that stressful energy. For others, that actually kind of revs them up more and isn't helpful. So if some of these things we have to try and then see what works for us, and then be aware of that as we make decisions. And it's also why it's so important for educators to understand that regulation is an inside job. That it's not about telling kids what to do and they're supposed to do it. It's that they need to listen to themselves. They need to practice, try some things, and then have a process where they can reflect back on that and realize, okay, that helped, that didn't help. I want to do more of this next time, less of that. Here's maybe something somebody else could do to support me. Because for some folks, it's more about doing some things that are kind of down regulating, whether it's more gentle movement or breathing. But breathing isn't regulating for everybody. It just depends on the person. But things like expressing our feelings can be helpful, but different things are helpful to folks depending on how dysregulated they are too. And sometimes we absolutely need other people to be there with us, to support us. And that it's so important to understand that nobody has to regulate all on their own all the time.
Right. No, I love that. I love that, because what you're saying is that we need to recognize the importance of it, learn about it, understand it, and then start making our own plans, or helping our students, our children make their own plans.
Absolutely. Any other questions that you're noticing, Kelsey, that you think we should focus on?
I don't.
There's not anything in the chat at the moment.
All right. Well, then I think we should move on to a few of my favorite things. So Like every educator, I know how helpful it can be to have resources in your classroom when you're teaching anything. And the more hands-on, experiential we can make things and use all of our senses, the better we all are with learning. So we have several things we want to show you that are just optional things to consider. You make the decisions that are best for your students. But I'm going to share you a few things, two things actually, that I like to use. And then Jess and Kelsey are going to share some things too. So one of my favorite things to use is a glitter jar. This one is glass. Obviously, it can break, but I've also learned from experience that plastic ones can also break. And either way, custodians are not really happy about a lot of glitter to clean. So, from experience, of course. So be mindful of that. But the reason I like to use these as a teaching tool is to shake it up. And then to say to kids, have you ever felt like this inside? Have you ever been all stirred up or mixed up inside? And then they can turn and talk to a neighbor about what kinds of things kind of lead to that for you, or what do you notice in your body? And then you can teach about the hand model of the brain, about what's happening inside our nervous systems when we're experiencing this kind of a reaction. And the other thing I love to use when teaching is some kind of brain representation, whether it's a live, well, not live, well, you'll have our live brain string, but a brain, a real human brain from like a local college. I have taken that in and showed it to students, which is really, really powerful for the kids who want to look at it. But you can also find other models like this plush one that can be helpful too. And this one is kind of cool because it shows glial cells, dopamine, neurons, and serotonin too. So it's kind of a fun thing to have around too. Kelsey, what do you want to share?
I love books, so I brought a couple books today. The first one is Dear You, Love from Your Brain by Karen Young and published by Hay Sigmund Publishing. It's a picture book that goes in, and the illustrations are beautiful. And it really goes through different parts of the brains and the functions. And even though it's a picture book, I feel like I could read this with the teenagers and it would just really simply explain some of the neuroscience. And I also love that it has tips on how to love on your brain. So this is one I definitely would recommend. The second one is a science comics, The Brain. It is the author's Tori Wolcott, and it's published by First Second New York. And it's a graphic novel. And I feel like you're going to grab a different audience with a graphic novel that you would with a picture book or a chapter book. Again, there's a kidnapping in the book, so just be aware of that. It doesn't really focus on the kidnapping, but it talks more about like what's going on in the brain while all this action is happening. And there's a lot of great science in it. And I just feel like it would appeal to a different set of readers. So those are my two favorite things.
Thank you. There's a couple other books up there too that we like, but Jess has some other things to share.
Well, I have two more things that you could bring into your classrooms or homes. The first one is a floor puzzle of the brain that would work great with younger kids. And they also have a older one, or this one's more like 500 pieces or so. But I just could see you doing this with my kids at school during, indoor recess, or like I said, in your own homes to talk about it with your own families. But to keep that language of the brain and what each different part does and the purpose of them, but to keep that in front and center and just to give opportunities for practice.
Very good. Very good. As we kind of come to a close here today, I just want to thank all of our special guests for being here. Sophie for coming and asking questions and sharing with us your ideas too. Really appreciate that. And for those of you who are watching live or catching us on replay, please hit that subscribe button. And we want to ask you to share this with somebody, whether you're sharing it on your own social media or you're inviting somebody to our next live. Know that the next one is in February on the 10th with Miss Jen, starting at 5:30 p.m. Central, same place, same time, number of the day, just a different month. Next month's topic is, so yoga is regulating, or at least it can be, now what? What does that mean for the classroom? Should educators be doing yoga in the classroom with their kids? If so, how? What does it look like or not? What is a trauma-sensitive approach to that kind of movement? We will have a special guest I'm not going to announce yet, but we'll be announcing as we get closer. And I really hope you will not only join us, but you will make a plan to invite and bring another educator with you too. We have some other things coming up on our plate as well that I'll share. So the live is on day 10 in February, like I just mentioned. And as Julie mentioned, the Attachment Trauma Network have their annual conference coming up in February too. So I will be speaking on February 17th, which is a Monday. I'm actually speaking twice. Once by myself, doing a session focused on non-certified staff and what they can do to put relationships first in every trauma-informed school. Lots of practical suggestions in that one. And then I'll be co-presenting that same day with Andretisha Fitzgerald, which I am just over the moon to tell you about. She is an anti-racist educator with tons of experience in utilizing universal design for learning. And she and I have done some writing together, which we will be kicking off at ATN. And we're so excited that we're going to be co-presenting together on that very topic, meaning what does it mean to be a trauma-sensitive educator and why does anti-racism need to be a part of it? Then later in February on the 25th, I'll be facilitating a webinar with Brooks Publishing on the 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern. There's a QR code there. There's a link where you can learn more and register. This one is for school leaders. So think principals, instructional coaches, other coaches, but anybody who takes on a leadership role in your school, you're welcome to join. And we'll be focused on what does a school-wide approach to big threatening behaviors really need to entail from a trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive perspective. Hope to see you there.
Julie, do you have anything to add about ATN? I'm excited to be coming in February. And
well, we're excited that you're going to be here. There's registration is happening right now, so it's not too late. And you'll get to, if you sign up, you'll get to meet Miss Jen and Jess live. If you can't make it to Atlanta, then join us virtually on that Thursday and Friday of that week, because we will be recording some of our sessions to share there. But we also will be having Dan Siegel as one of our keynotes. So Dr. Siegel himself will probably do a hand brain model for us, which, how can you get better than that? Anyway, we encourage you to check everything out on ATN's website as well, our certification and the other things that we're doing. But right now we're in full conference mode, and we look forward to seeing all the educators there.
Well, we can't wait. It's always a wonderful conference to be at and to connect with ATNers whom we love. And this year, Jess and Kelsey will be there. We are exhibiting. Awesome. So if you're coming to the conference, please come introduce yourself to us at the table, or reconnect if you already know us. We want to talk with you about what we do and how we can support you and other educators in your schools. We're here for you. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. We can't wait to be back again next time. How should we kind of wrap things up today, Kelsey?
Okay. Thank you so much for coming. This is a resource that we are trying to keep free for educators. We want to share with you our favorite things and some tips to take into the classroom, and we want to keep that free. So if you feel inclined to buy somebody on our team a tea, there's a Venmo right there that is available, since we were all about the tea today. And speaking of the tea, we are going to have a challenge. We will have a social media post up in a couple of weeks. It's the Spill the Tea Challenge, and we just want to hear how this is going for you. Did you go back to your environment and teach anybody about the brain? Did you try using the hand signals? Did you have success with it? Was it a flop? We just want to know, because we're trying to create community and connection here. So we will pick a winner and treat you to something as well.
Awesome. So much fun. It's one of the things that we said we wanted to do is we wanted to support you. We want to be in community because you ask us for that, and we want it to be enjoyable while you're learning something too. As we close out tonight, if you're catching us here right now, you are welcome to leave a comment in the chat, one word even, if you want to, that goes with something that you're taking away this time, or if you want to leave that in a comment on replay on social media, you're welcome to do that too. One word to go with it. I think my word as we close out today is just thankfulness for everybody who was here and the work that we've all been part of, and how it's going to continue to grow. Really good stuff. Thanks everybody so much. Please take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.